Very much agree. Um, Shifting gears a little bit into, I think, kind of some of the meat of the conversation that I was most excited for to talk to you about. You put out a super interesting article on Medium about, can my open source company raise a Series A? Um, you want to just kind of maybe just for the audience that has not read it, just maybe kind of very briefly summarize, and we can dive in from there.
Yeah, definitely. So this actually was never intended to be a like public facing Medium post. I ran this survey because a few of my open source companies were thinking about their like next round of funding. A number of those are Series A's, and they wanted to know based on where the market is now versus a year and a half ago, if they like how they should plan for their open source metrics, but also commercial strategies to get to a place where they could successfully raise Series A from the top Series A investors. And for context, why this I think is particularly important for open source companies is you had like call it like 2-ish years ago, maybe like three, like 1.5 to 3.5 years ago, open source companies that were able to raise off of just open source traction and like raise really big rounds. I put the example in the Medium post of Airbyte Series A, where it was 25 million Series A and an awesome team, awesome market, but like nothing on the commercial side yet, very early as far as a lot of their open source metrics. And so that is like, in my view, was clouding a lot of really early stage companies' views of what they needed to get to in order to successfully raise Series A. So in order to just kind of like get some data to back what I thought was going to be the case for the Series A market, I surveyed a bunch of my friends who are Series A investors. I think there ended up being like 19 or 20 of them, and got data about what they were looking for. And so I just packaged it up, sent it to my companies. They thought it was super valuable because there were some insights in there that weren't obvious around the metrics that those investors thought were most important, around how many of them had actually changed their views on monetization. And they hadn't necessarily shared that publicly, but in this, anonymized format where it was like a bunch of different opinions, they like kind of, I think, shared more freely. So it turned into a blog post just because I thought it could be something that other founders could benefit from. And then I've actually heard subsequently that there are some founders that have used those metrics in board slides and have been like really driving towards
Oh, there we
metrics
go.
to hit there, which I mean is super exciting.
Yeah, and what's interesting is we've talked to several founders in the last couple of months where we've asked them about their different series and fundraising, and a lot of them have been like, "Oh, we haven't had to think revenue yet," or it's a very late even thought process to them. And so that is starting to change, especially in the market. So your blog post was very timely, but it's really interesting to hear like, oh no, we just decided for, like 4 years or 3 years, we're not going to focus on revenue at all.
Yeah.
And we've heard that. And is that unusual? Like, I mean, that has changed, right?
So it's interesting. It has changed, but my view on this is you can't kind of go into monetizing an open source community in a rushed way because it's like first and foremost it's a community that's centered around the movement that is your project, and so you can't really approach it the same way as a typical like freemium tool. But at the same time, because of how much capital has been in the market and where the expectations are for revenue, there's kind of this like mismatch going on. So I actually think that like if you're going to raise like a larger seed, like 3 to 5 million, then you have to get to like pretty substantial commercial traction by Series A. But I actually think like the right answer is going to end up being a lot of these companies raising smaller like pre-seed rounds, like in the like 500K to 1.5 million, then raising a seed, and then by Series A getting to enough traction where they can like show commercial proof points, show the ability that their project has to like generate pipeline and revenue. But yeah, it's there. I think like this was also one of the goals of the post where I just think that like there's a disconnect between what I'm hearing from investors and like seeing in public markets on expectations revenue wise versus early stage founders, especially first time founders, because they're looking at like, okay, well, my friend who's also an open source founder raised a $5 or $6 million seed round, and like then they're like planning to raise Series A with like no commercial traction, and so I just wanted there to be a data set out there to level set.